You ever had a phrase that stayed with you your entire life? I have. I'm going to share one with you today. In the late 1980s, there was a show called In the Heat of the Night. And this show comprised of two main characters, one by the name of Chief Gillespie and the other by the name of Virgil, Detective Virgil Tibbs. There was this one episode when they were working a cold case. And when they were working this cold case, they had no leads whatsoever. And suddenly the phone rang. And when the phone rang, Chief Gillespie jumped up, he put his big hat on, and he put his jacket on, and here's the phrase. He said, "Virgil, we got a lead and we're going down to the bottoms." I'm doing the best Chief Gillespie impersonation I could do. He said, "We're going down to the bottoms." I said, "The bottoms? Where and what is the bottoms?" Listen, the English language is linear, it's scrawny. Words can't describe how poor these people were living mentally and physically. In fact, it was a look all too familiar. These people were looking like broken crayons down in the bottoms. Today, we explore a concept that holds immense power, yet often eludes our grasp. That even though crayons are broken, it does not mean that they cannot color. I grew up in Sugar Land, Texas, middle-class household. No, we didn't live in the bottoms physically, however, mentally we were. I grew up with three older sisters, and they all moved out between the ages of 14 and 16. We grew up in a very aggressive, violent household. So violent that our story landed on the front page newspaper of the Herald Coaster. I recall this one day. I heard my mother and father screaming at one another downstairs. And as the tensions rose, I just knew that this would be the day that my father kills my mother. Therefore, I made a conscious decision to hide underneath the bed in case I had to be the one to defend her. I recall hearing my father's footsteps as he walked up the stairs. And he came inside of the room, and I remember seeing the silhouette of his feet. He cleared the room thinking the whole home was vacant. He went back downstairs to continue his obnoxious behavior. And suddenly the tensions rose. But then a whisper came over me. And it said that even if he's going to kill your mother, you're too afraid to do anything about it. Every ounce of heroism had exited my body. In fact, I was afraid. It was fear. I'll say it again, I was afraid. And you want to know what's worse than being afraid? Being afraid of being afraid. The late, great A.E. Houseman said it best. He said, "I'm a stranger afraid in this world that I never made." This fear has segued into my adulthood. This anger had turned into fear, and this fear had turned into violence until one day I took a step back and I surveyed my surroundings. However, it wasn't until I closed my eyes that I began to see that everything going on out there was a reflection of what was going on in here. I had to rid myself of this resistance. I realized I could no longer access high-level doors with low-level keys, that in order to evolve in this life, this resistance must be non-existent. Therefore, I created a safe place inside of my own, which is my closet. Inside of this safe place, I learned the unknown art of meditation. Inside of this unknown space, it was not an escape, it was a return. A return to a place older than fear. A return to a place older than words. In fact, inside of this unknown space, I learned the mystery of life. Raise your hands if you'd like to know what the mystery of life is. The mystery of life is that there are no mysteries. Inside of this unknown space, I learned the statement by James Allen to be true, that the mind is the master power that molds and makes. And with the tool of thought, we create our own experiences. For when we think in secrecy, those things, they come to pass. This environment is but our looking glass. Inside of this unknown space, I became ubiquitous. I was omnipresent. I became two places at one time inside of my mind. I went back to that childhood home and I walked up to fear and I acknowledged it and I looked it in the eyes and I told it, you no longer have permission to rent space inside of my mind. I kicked in that front door. I heard my mother and father screaming at one another. I walked right past them. I went right up those stairs. I made that sharp right turn, and I grabbed that 10-year-old boy from the bottom of that bed, and I looked him in the eyes, and I stood him up straight. I said, you're not built to break. You're strong. And it's not your responsibility to correct the mistakes of grown people who can't fix their own problems. I grabbed him by his hand. I walked him down those stairs. I walked right past my parents. And I went out that door and I slammed it behind me. I was free. I was liberated. I was no longer paying the debt that I didn't owe. You ever been to the bottom? You ever felt like broken crayons? You remember that job promotion that you keep applying for and yet they constantly overlook you? What about that divorce that you've been through that's just sucked the whole life out of you? Or that unbearable diagnosis from the doctor and now your mind and your body is no longer in alignment? The childhood trauma that you keep running from, that you feel like you can't correct and face. Perhaps you're not fully alive now. You think maybe someday you will be. What about stressed? What about depressed? Well, here's the idea. I want you to grab that resistance and look it in the eyes and tell it, you no longer have permission to rent space inside of my mind. Wouldn't it be great to have no fear? No attachments, no hang-ups, to be as free as the air, seeing that all life is a magnificent illusion. I mean, it's a playing of energy, and there's absolutely nothing fundamentally to be afraid of. Wouldn't it be crazy to have that type of courage? When you find out who you are, it doesn't matter who you've been. If you find yourself down at the bottom, say to yourself, in fact, I'll say it for you, there's lifting up. And if you ever find yourself as these broken crayons, this is the phrase for you to remember your entire life. Broken crayons, they still color. Thank you.